Published in the year 1937, just 10 years before India won her independence, the foreword to Raja Rao's widely influential novel Kanthapura is an important document articulating the peculiar dilemma of a non British, especially Indian, writing in English. In fact, it has some very significant observations, rather suggestions, regarding the plausible themes, the preferable language and style, etc., for Indian writers of English. And therefore, this section is often read independently of the novel and can also be treated as a document of, we can say with hindsight now, postcolonial theory. Rao identifies three distinct yet interconnected areas in which Indian writing in English would necessarily deviate from English writing in English, let us say. Number one is theme, number two is language, and number three is style. I would personally consider number two and number three interconnected, very closely related, and it's difficult to differentiate between the two. But then he has written it in this way. Now, firstly, what he has to say regarding the theme of his novel, or rather, the a suggestion for themes that Indian writers can choose, interestingly prefigures the postmodern celebrations of small narratives, I would say, along with the postcolonial penchant for local or indigenous narratives. Every village in India, according to Raja Rao, has distinctive local legends, which of course are often connected to national legends. The term national here is used for convenience because the way these local legends had been connected with pan Indian legends for over the years, you know, actually predate the kind of nationalism that we have now, or the kind of nation that we have now. That was a cultural nationalism, and after British, we more or less moved towards the political nationhood, but both are important, I would say. So Raj Rao says, I would rather read from his foreword because this is quite self explanatory, but then the categorization had to be done, which is why I made this talk, especially for undergraduate students for whom this is prescribed. There is no village in India, however mean, that has not a rich sthala-purana or legendary history of its own. Some god or godlike hero has passed by the village. Rama might have rested under this papal-tree. Sita might have dried her clothes after her birth on this yellow stone, or the Mahatma himself, on one of his many pilgrimages through the country, might have slept in this hut. This is very real. In fact, even if I can give example from my state, Assam, there are places where the local people or local legends assert that this is connected with the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. Sita Jakhala, for instance, or Tejpur, where the famous King Bana of Bhagavata supposed to have resided. There are, and an interesting thing is that there are, this relation is not unique to Assam only, and sometimes the same legend is claimed by multiple places as its own. For example, the story of Rukmini, Krishna, marrying Rukmini, we from Assam relate Shadia, that is uppermost ashram, with that Rukmini legend, saying that this is the Vidarbha. Whereas in Maharashtra, an entire region called Vidarbha is there even till date, and they want a separate Vidarbha. They claim that that is the place which is mentioned in Bhagavatam as Vidarbha. And in fact, the wife of Krishna, who is worshipped as Bittal, for example, in Maharashtra, is known as Rakhumai, which is actually a declension from Rukmini. Bittal Rakhumai in almost every temple, whether Shiva and others, that couple is there. Local form of Radha Krishna, we can say, or Lakshmi Narayan, etc. This is just an example to establish the validity of Raja Rao's claim. And then there are secular gods and goddesses, we can say, like Gandhi, Tagore. So you often claim in Eastern India, and in this place Subhash Bose had come, or in this place Gandhi had come and rested for a day. In Shilchar, for example, Gandhi Mela is held every year. Due to COVID, now it is not being held, but every year in a place where Gandhiji is supposed to have, just sat for a while, and his statue is there. So Raja Rao is right and in saying that every place in India has a sthala-purana, a local legend of its own, which may be an ancient legend or maybe a modern legend. He was writing during the high tide of the Gandhian struggle for independence, or Indian struggle for independence. And this novel basically thematically is also a study in or a representation of this Gandhian or Indian freedom struggle. Both are interchangeable, at least so far as this novel is concerned, whereas it is also quite aware of the earlier traditions, and the village draws its origins from a local goddess called Kanchamma. Origins means existence, who had protected the village in times of crisis. So in that way, both traditional and modern narratives, modern legends, are woven together seamlessly in this novel called Kanthapura. And I would like to say, as I have already indicated, this is not only special about Kanthapura, which in any case is a symbolic place. This is true of almost every place in India. So that is the theme of the novel, and Raja Rao suggests that indirectly that Indian writers of English should choose such local themes connected to, of course, national issues and not grand narratives, to use a postmodernist term. Next to theme actually is the question of language, and that is the trickiest part. Language has been such a complicated issue of the entire colonial intercourse that India or Africa or any colonized country had with England. We remember what Caliban said: "You taught me language, my profit on it is I know how to curse." Raja Rao says, I quote, "One has to convey in a language that is not one's own the spirit that is one's own." That is the crux of the problem, and then in a way the crux of this foreword also, from my point of view at least, that you have to convey in a language, that is, if you are an Indian writing in English or an Indian writing English, you have to convey in a language which is not your own, feelings which are your own. And then after a few lines in the same foreword, he says another very interesting thing, that English is the language of our intellectual makeup, like Sanskrit or Persian was before, but not of our emotional makeup. This is also by and large true, barring a few Anglo-Indians or highly anglicized metropolitan families. English is not our native language. Immediately he contradicts himself by saying that English is again not really an alien language to us. Some of you may know, or as we say in Indian English, might be knowing that English is not a foreign language in India. That is why university departments are often named departments of English and foreign languages. English is not a foreign language. It is one of the, though not recognized as the main Indian language, but this is one of the Indian languages, and Sahitya Academy award is also given for writing in English. We have made English our own, following the vein of rather the suggestions of Raja Rao in Kanthapura. But then the problem remains. Many things we have to translate into a language which is not sufficient to express the original ethos. And this is not only about emotions or feelings, this is about matters also, materials also. No, many vegetables that we use in India actually are not found or were not found in England. That's why certain terms were concocted. Like, since I'm a Bengali, I'll give a similar example, I mean, familiar example from this side. What is known as Uche or Kerala or Kerala in, say, Hindi is translated as bitter gourd. Similarly, what we call jhinge or jhinga or zika in Assamese, ridge gourd. This is a gourd which is ridges, RIDG. So ridge gourd, bitter gourd. That these are all actually concoctions. So he further says, we cannot write like the English. We should not. We cannot write only as Indians. That is again a very aporiac series of statements, he says. That is, we should not try to be like the British. At the same time, we cannot afford to be only Indians now that we know English. So, in a way, Raja Rao is the perfect post colonial theorist much before post colonial theory, you know, was officially announced in the 80s. B. Lashcroft and others' books. In writing in 1937, he was resisting colonial discourse and at the same time resisting nativism also, that we cannot write only in English. He therefore says our method of expression therefore has to be a dialect which will someday prove to be as distinctive and colorful as the Irish or the American. Time alone will justify it. And he was right, Indian English has become a very successful language, though we can say there is not a single mode of Indian English, there are many types. And here, another contemporary stalwart, Buddhadev Boshu, was proved wrong. Buddhadev Boshu unfortunately had predicted that Indian writing in English had no future. And he was proved wrong, and Raja Rao was proved right. Otherwise, a talented person, of course, Buddhadev Boshu. Anyway, I think our young friends have understood what is at stake. The third problem that is shares with us is that of style. In brief, Western styles, European styles, or English styles, with due respect to theories of anti-essentialism, European styles, English styles, or Western styles are curt, brief. To use, Arnold's language, I would say, pithy, polished, and aphoristic. Except the Victorian novels, many of them were so bulky that even Rabindranath Tagore had strong reservations about their size at least. Otherwise, they have things of limited length. We, to the contrary, are in the mode of going on forever. So, Raja Rao gives the classic example of Mahabharata and the Ramayana, saying that Mahabharata has 2,14,778 verses, or actually 1 lakh plus shlokas. That is why it is also known as Shatasahasri Samhita, the Samhita which contains 100,000 shlokas, and Ramayana 48,000. Puranas there are endless. Actually, there are recognized Puranas which number 118, of which there are 18 Mahapuranas and 18 Upapuranas, and then the rest are not in any category, and then still Puranas are emerging. So we go on and on and on. Episode follows episode, and when our thoughts stop, our breath stops, and we move on to another thought. We don't have any sense of pause, Raja Rao says. I mean, this we don't have any sense of pause is my word, but I have interpreted what is said in just the previous sentence. This was and still is the ordinary style of our storytelling. So we are quote unquote talkative by nature and we are happy about that, I think. Though sometimes we go on a little bit more, a little rather more than we should, but then, well, this is our way of life. Maybe in this way we are balancing the silences of the other part of the world who talk in a measured way, no, even laugh and smile in measured ways. We don't. Now, he says, I have tried to follow it myself in this story. The story itself, that is Kanthapura, the style that he has followed is not the classic realist style of English novel, not the modernist style of English novel as was available by then in writings of James Joyce and others. Ulysses was published in 1922 and this one in 1937 when Raja Rao was only 37 years old. I would say. So, sorry, 29 years old. I have tried to follow it myself in this story. So, this is more or less like a grandmother telling the story, and in fact, a grandmother called Achakka is the narrator of the story, and it goes on and on. I can point you to another author in African literature in similar predicament, Chinua Achebe. If you have read his Things Fall Apart, the style is the same. It does not follow the English style, English language as such, but African things are direct, often verbatim translated into English. And this is what Raja Rao also does. But then this is the only novel where he does things like this, not in these subsequent novels. So, in brief, to recapitulate, there are three problems for an Indian writing in English. First one is of theme, which theme should be chosen, and then though Raja Rao has not represented it as a problem, but it's rather an implicit suggestion that local legends are to be preferred. Second is language. Languages are very different at root. And third, the associated problem is that of style. Our styles are not rather laconic, not compact. We have verbose and kind of euphuistic style, euphuistic if not euphemistic, and we go on and on and on. But then Raja Rao has tried to make a fusion and it has been successful. So I hope you find this talk also, which has again, like Raja Rao's observation on Indians, which has gone a little more than I had originally planned. Thank you.